네, 반갑습니다. 지금 시간이 많이 지체된 관계로 원래대로 하자면 저희가 4시에 끝나기로 돼 있는데 한 10분 정도 더 하려고 하고요. 그래서 이제 Q&A 세션에서는 청중으로부터 질문을 받기보다는 제가 준비한 질문을 좀 한두 가지 정도 줄여서 하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 이제 탄소 중립을 위한 이런 아주 중요한 또 그리고 뜻깊은 자리를 만들었는데요. 이 포럼을 할 때 지식을 함양한다기보다는 지혜를 모으는 포럼이 가장 좋은 그러한 포럼이다 하는 얘기가 있습니다. 그래서 우리가 오늘 첫 번째 세션에서는 저희보다 먼저 탄소 중립을 이뤄 나갔던 북유럽 3국과 그 다음에 영국으로부터 지혜를 모으는 그런 자리를 갖도록 하겠습니다. The best forum is not gathering knowledge, but also gathering wisdom. So I think this forum is to gather wisdom from all your experience that you have to achieve carbon neutralization in the future. 제가 오늘 원활한 진행을 위해서 우리나라 말과 그 다음에 영어를 혼용하도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 오늘 네 분의 발제자들을 모시고 토론을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. The first speaker for this session is 요하네스. He is a senior project manager of Bandipli Firefly Wind Project, and please welcome him with big hands. Point.
This one. Just. Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for being invited here today. My name is Yohane스, and I'm representing Equinorre. I'm based here in South Korea, in Busan, and I'm working as project manager for one of our wind projects, the Bandipli project. It's a 750 megawatt floating wind farm outside Ulsan area. Equinorre is an international company headquartered in Norway. Our main owner is the Norwegian state, which owns 67% of the company. 23,000 people are going to work for Equinorre every day. We are in 30 countries. We collaborate with approximately 8,000 suppliers every year, and we provide energy to approximately 170 million people every day. We have a target to be net zero in 2050. Oil and gas is still the backbone on our business, but that also gives us a position to enter with a good position into low carbon and renewables. And in low carbon, it's CCS, hydrogen, and also electrification of our existing oil and gas facilities. Our renewable target is 12 to 16 gigawatts within 2030, and that includes both solar and offshore wind. We have an ambition that within 2030, we're going to spend 50% on all our capex within the renewables area. So, we want to be a contributor to help South Korea meet the targets on renewables, which is 12 gigawatts within 2030. And we want to be a leading company in the energy transition. We have established offices in Ulsan, Busan, and Seoul. And we have a project portfolio of approximately 3.5 gigawatts, whilst the Bandibuli project is the most mature. That's a 750 megawatt floating wind project, and we have a plan to enter into the auction by the end of this year. Why offshore wind and why floating wind? Well, I think we need floating wind to reach the overall goals. The winds are stronger and more consistent out in the sea. By using floating wind turbines, we are able to place the wind farms where it's the best wind conditions, and we can produce the most. And close to 80% of the world's offshore wind resources are in waters above 60 meters, meaning above 60 meters it's very difficult to have bottom-fixed wind turbines, and we need floating technology. Floating wind is not a new technology. We have done it before. Equinorre have executed 3 projects with floating wind farms. The first was one single turbine, 2.3 megawatts, back in 2009. The second one was Hywind Scotland. That's 5 turbines, in total 30 megawatts. And lastly, which I have the pleasure to join, was the Hywind Tampen project in Norway, where we are powering our existing oil and gas production, and we cover approximately 30% of the power demand for these platforms. I think it's 2 really important elements by this project. Number 1, we reduce CO2 emissions at our facilities, but likely important, it's very important to develop the technology that is required. And by this project, we managed to reduce the cost per megawatt with approximately 30 to 40% compared to the previous project. But to do this, we need support. We need some startup help. And for this project, the Norwegian authorities supported us with approximately 2.3 or 2.8 billion NOK before we started to execute these projects. And that's approximately 35% of the total capex of the project. I'll skip this slide as we have a little short time. So this is my last slide, and I want to spend a little bit time on that. So what does it take to develop floating projects around the world, or as the Bandibuli project we have here outside Ulsan? I think I put up 4 different elements that I think is crucial that we should work on. And the first one is transparency and efficiency in regulatory regimes. We, as a developer, need clear regulatory framework to reduce our risks and the uncertainties in the project, and thereby I think we also then can increase the speed and pace of the project development. And we are in a hurry, as Mr. Moon said earlier. Number 2, we need to scale up. We have done small projects now, but now we need to go from, in our case, 100 megawatts up to 750 megawatts. That will also bring the cost down per megawatt. Number 3 is that we need collaboration with the industry, and we need to continue the technology development. We need more collaboration with national and international companies and further develop the technology we need. And we, as a developer, we have a lot of smart heads in our company, but we really need all the other heads out there at the suppliers to succeed. And the fourth element, which is very important, is to improve collaboration with stakeholders which are using the same waters as we do. And I think early engagement with this, for instance fisheries, is a key to success and align and be able to continue. So by that, and I think the ocean is big, there is space enough for all of us out there, but we need to talk to each other. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. 우리나라에서 어떤 윈드 파워 에너지를 생산하고 보급하는 데서 중요한 그러한 우리가 고려해야 될 사항들을 이제 결론 부분에서 정리를 해주셨던 것 같습니다. We're gonna move to next speaker. Next presentation will be done by Acting Ambassador of Sweden in Seoul, Korea, Mr. 요하네스 안드레아손. Please welcome him with big hands.
안녕하세요. 스웨덴대사관 요하네스입니다. Very nice to meet you this afternoon, and thanks a lot for inviting me to this event. I want to start by showing you this picture. Let's see. This is Ludvika. It's a town in Sweden of about 15,000 people, so quite a small town. In Sweden it may be called a city. Ludvika has a very long tradition of industrial production. Already 600 years ago in this area, iron was mined. 500 years ago, one of the government's first own ironworks was set up in this area. At the start of the 20th century here in Ludvika, out of the ironworks industry, a mechanical industry grew, which later became a key player in the electrification of Sweden. This industry became the Swedish electric engineering company ASEA, which became ABB, which today is Hitachi Energy, former ABB Power Grids. For more than 100 years, this kind of small city in Ludvika has been a pioneer in the electrification of societies all over the world. In the 1950s, the world's first modern commercial high-voltage direct current, HVDC, transmission was developed here in Ludvika. Today, almost half of this town's population, some 6,000 people, work at this site here, developing the next generation of HVDC. As you probably know, HVDC is a way of transmitting energy with less energy loss and higher reliability. In Sweden, we have a number of these areas which have a long history of industrial production, which have now grown into becoming climate-friendly industries. For example, in the north, traditionally an area where we had a lot of pulp and paper industry, hydropower industry, and mining. Today, this is where we see a growing industrial cluster of green steel and EV batteries. In the West, traditionally the stronghold of Swedish car and automotive industry, well, that has now transformed into an industry where focus is on electric vehicles and also other kinds of electric vehicles. For example, there is a company that are developing electric aeroplanes also in this area. So the reason I mention power transmission specifically as an example, which I did with Ludvika, is that power... Let me get the right one here. Is that power transmission is such a key component in the entire green transition. Electricity demand in Sweden is growing rapidly. We need more electricity to be able to to do the green transition in the time that we need. We see that electricity demand, energy demand it will be doubled by 2045. At the same time, we're aiming to be fossil free also by 2045. How do you accomplish this? Well, we need a quite rapid expansion of green energy, which means renewables such as solar, wind, as we heard the previous speaker saying, and other parts. Also, nuclear energy will be a key part of our transition in this respect. And we see the same kind of development all over the world. Massively increased electricity demands, which leads to building out of generation capabilities, nuclear power, renewables, and then you need to expand the grid to be able to transmit this energy from the source of generation to where it is needed, and that's where the transmission comes in. This is the same situation in Korea, a huge increase in power demand, a lot of plans for increasing generation by renewables, as we just heard, but also by nuclear power. However, the power grid in Korea is not expanding at the same pace. This is a bottleneck, and it's a bottleneck also in other countries, a stumbling block, as we heard former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon say. And that is where governments come in. Our companies, Swedish and Korean companies, they develop fantastic solutions. A lot of them are increasing efficiency by a very big extent, and they're also developing much more environmentally friendly solutions. This is something that we, as a government, we need to facilitate. We need to help them to develop these solutions. And that's the interesting part in Sweden, because the companies, they're actually pushing us, the government, to do more to facilitate for them, set the regulations in a predictable way, expand the electricity grid, expand the infrastructure so that they can roll out their environmentally and sustainable solutions on the market. So this is where we come in. This is what we need to do. And so far, it has worked well in Sweden. As you can see here, we have reduced since 1990, about 45, more than 30 years ago, we have reduced our carbon emissions by 30%, while at the same time, our GDP has almost doubled. It is possible. It really is possible. It takes a lot of work, but it's possible to do so. And as we also heard previous speaker talk about, this has to be done together with others. We cannot do it alone. We need collaborations to develop those new solutions, both when it comes to regulation on the global level, set ambitious targets, but also to develop new sustainable solutions. So that's why we launched 3 years ago the Sweden-Korea Green Transition Alliance, consisting of a number of Swedish companies and the embassy and other partners to collaborate together with Korea to try to accelerate the green transition. We need to collaborate, and we need to work closely with Korea to make this a possibility. That's why I'm very happy that you invited me to this forum today. And I hope that we can find more opportunities to collaborate in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience of green transition in Sweden. 스웨덴의 전통 산업의 녹색 전환 경험을 공유해 주셨습니다. 특히 기업과 정부가 함께 노력해 경제 성장을 지속적으로 성취해 가면서 탄소 중립을 달성하는 그러한 아주 이상적인 모습을 보여주신 것 같습니다. We're going to move to next presentation. Next presentation will be done by Mr. Jong-gu Park. He is a general manager of Danfoss Korea. Please welcome him with big hands.
네, 안녕하세요. 댄포스 코리아를 맡고 있는 박종구입니다. 한국어로 진행하겠습니다. 네. 저희는 오늘은 에너지 효율성에 대해서 말씀드리고자 합니다. 에너지 효율성, 그러니까 저희가 덴포스는 에너지 효율성을 여러 가지 퍼스펙티브에서 바라보고 있습니다. 단순히 인풋 대비 아웃풋을 증가시키는 것이 아니라 에너지 효율성은 어떤 관점에서 바라보고 해야 되며, 이런 그 경험을 바탕으로 저희가 최근에 화이트 페이퍼 에너지 에피션시 2.0이라는 화이트 페이퍼를 발간하게 되었고, 간략하게 소개해드리겠습니다. 저희 덴포스입니다. 저희 덴포스는 1933년 덴마크에서 탄생했고요. 전 세계 100여 개 국가에서 시장 참여자와 고객의 탈탄소화 여정에 함께하는 최고의 기술 파트너가 되는 것이 저희 사업의 목표입니다. 그리고 선도적으로 2030년까지 저희 사업장 한 100여 개 정도의 사업장에 넷제로 스코프 1, 2 범위에서 넷제로를 달성하는 것이 저희 목표이기도 하고, 그렇게 실행하도록 노력하고 있습니다. 저희 아까 사무총장님께서 Seeing is Believing이라고 하셨죠. 지금 저희 사례 두 가지를 말씀드릴 건데요. 첫 번째 사례는 저희 노드보그 공장 캠퍼스에 있는 넷제로 사례입니다. 저희가 2022년도 기준년도 2007년도 대비해서 넷제로를 달성을 했고요. 달성하는 방법은 우리가 옛날에 표에서 많이 봤죠. 아껴 쓰고 다시 쓰고 줄어든 소유를 재생에너지로 충당하자 라는 것입니다. 첫 번째, 아껴 쓰는 것입니다. 저희는 에너지 진단 프로그램을 통해서, 에너지 진단을 통해서 주말, 그 다음에 아이들링, 휴지기에 있는 설비를 어떻게 지금 그 에너지 소비량을 줄일 것인지 연구를 했고요. 두 번째는 그 에너지 효율이 높은 제품들을 적용하기 시작했습니다. 그리고 두 번째 단계에 있어서는 다시 쓰는 방법. 그러니까 에너지 공장, 저희도 공장을 운영을 하고 있습니다. 공장 설비에서 나오는 수많은 열들을 재활용합니다. 그리고 데이터 센터 저희가 운영하고 있는데, 저희 인하우스 데이터 센터에서 발생하는 열들을 재순환을 시킵니다. 재사용을 하게 되었습니다. 그렇게 해서 줄어든 에너지 소비를 재생에너지로 충당을 합니다. 열 에너지는, 전기 에너지는 2007년도 대비해서 43% 절감이 되었고, 열 에너지는 70% 절감이 되었습니다. 구체적인 사례는 이렇고요. 제일 처음에는 천연가스가 주요 열 에너지원이었습니다. 천연가스를 사용하다가 중간에는 천연가스 보일러보다 3배 이상, 최소 3배 이상 에너지 효율이 높은 히트펌프를 적용하게 되었고요. 저희 데이터 센터에서 발생되는 열을 재활용을 하고, 제일 마지막에 신재생 에너지를 생산하는 열을 생산하는 디스트릭트 히팅에서 저희가 열을 구매해서 넷제로를 달성을 했습니다. 그리고 본사가 위치한 썬더버그 자치구의 사례인데요. 저희 본사도 비슷하게 2007년도부터 넷제로 프로그램을 가동을 했고, 아껴 쓰고 다시 쓰고 재생에너지로 충당하는 그 프로세스를 따르고 있습니다. 2010년도, 20년도에는 기준년도에 대비해서 한 51% CO2 절감을 했었고, 2029년도 넷제로를 달성을 위해서 순항을 하고 있습니다. 저희는 이 썬더버그 프로젝트는 그 국제에너지기구로부터 2022년도에 세계 에너지 효율화의 수도라는 명칭을 부여받았고, 작년에 세계 경제 포럼에서 지속가능 도시라고 저희가 표준이라고 그렇게 명칭을 부여받았습니다. 백서의 내용인데요. 오늘 백서의 시간이 여의치 않아서 두 가지만 말씀드리겠습니다. 에너지 효율화 한다고 하면 그 백서의 내용은 전기화, 그 다음에 수요 측면의 효율성, 유연성, 에너지 전환, 에너지 저장, 그리고 에너지의 재사용에 대해서, 그 사례에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 먼저는 에너지의 유연성 확보입니다. 수요 유연성 확보입니다. 재생에너지의 가능성이라든지 재생에너지의 공급과 수요의 불일치를 해결하기 위해서 재생에너지 공급 측면의 유연성 확보를 위해서 많은 노력을 하고 있습니다. 많은 투자가 이루어지고 있죠. 배터리, 화석연료 발전을 기저부하로 활용한다든지, 이런 부분에 있어서 이런 부분이 재생에너지의 경쟁력을 떨어뜨리는 원인이 되기도 합니다. 그리드망 확충을 위한 엄청난 투자가 들어가야 되기 때문이죠. 하지만 저희는 수요 측면의 유연성을 확보한다면, 그러니까 저기 피크를 옮기거나 픽 쉐이빙을 통해서 로드를 낮출 수가 있다고 하면은 저 부하를 감당하기 위한 투자를 줄일 수 있다라는 아이디어에 출발했고, 2050년쯤 되면은 저 부분이 실용화됐을 때 2050년 되면은 한 10% 정도 전체 발전량을 줄일 수 있다라고 저희는 추정하고 있습니다. 조그만 슈퍼마켓 사례인데요. 간단하게 말씀드려서 전체 에너지의 3% 정도를 한 슈퍼마켓에서 전기가 사용이 되는데, 슈퍼마켓에서 전기 에너지가 재생에너지 공급이 충분할 때 관행각을 하게 되고, 재생에너지 공급이 부족할 때 관행각했던 열을 그대로 사용하는 그런 부분들이 적용화 되어 있고, 저희가 지금 현재 썬더버그에서 실제로 설치되고 있고, 저 슈퍼마켓에서는 회수되는 열을 재활용을 자체적으로 재활용하거나 그레이드에 묶어서 이웃에 있는 그 주택으로 판매하기도 합니다. 두 번째 사례는 열인데요. 앞서서 마찬가지로 열도 그 수요 예측 프로그램을 적용을 한다고 하면은 열 피크치의 한 10% 내지 19%는 절약할 수 있다라고, 피크치를 낮출 수 있다라고 저희는 보고 있고, 실제로 핀란드의 10만 세대 저희 프로그램을 적용한 결과 그렇게 되었다고 저희가 확인하고 있습니다. 이 프로그램이 전 세계 이제 전 유럽과 영국에 적용이 되었을 때 한 4천만 톤의 CO2가 2030년도에까지 절약할 수 있고, 이 금액은 한 14조 원, 그 최종 소비자에게는 7%의 에너지 비용이 절감될 것이라고 저희는 추정하고 있습니다. 너무 글밥이 많은데요. 에너지 재사용입니다. 전 세계 거의 모든 에너지 시스템에서는 열이라는 형태로 방출되거나 낭비될 수 있습니다. 이 열들을 관점에 따라서 폐열 혹은 과도한 열 혹은 미활용 에너지라고 불리고 합니다. 이 열들이 예를 들어서 수소 사회에서 중추적 역할을 담당하게 되는 수전의 시설, 데이터 센터, 그 다음에 앞서 말씀드린 슈퍼마켓에서 많은 열들을 발생하게 됩니다. 예를 들어서 데이터 센터와 오른쪽에 디스트릭트 쿨링만 예를 들을게요. 데이터 센터, 지금 현재 우리나라의 데이터 센터는 우리나라 전체 그 전기 수요에서 2에서 3%, 그리고 에너지경제연구원에서는 2030년 무렵이면 8% 정도를 사용한다고 합니다. 그 중에 절반이 데이터 센터를 식히는 데 사용됩니다. 그리고 데이터 센터를 식히는 과정에 있어서 열이 발생합니다. 그 열들은 대부분 우리나라에서 버려지고 있습니다. 미활용 에너지죠. 사실은 더블린 아모즈 웹 서비스 같은 경우는 그 주변에 열을 공급해서 따뜻한 열을 공급을 해서 전체적인 디맨드를 낮추고 있습니다. 그리고 디스트릭트 쿨링도 디스트릭트 히팅을 많이 들어보셨을 건데, 디스트릭트 쿨링도 파리와 지금 코펜하겐, 다른 지금 예를 들어 토론토에도 사용되고 있는데, 디스트릭트 쿨링이 미활용 에너지를 만났을 때, 그러니까 파리 같은 경우는 생강의 차가운 열을 이용하고 있고, 지금 코펜하겐 같은 경우는 차가운 바닷물을 이용하고 있고, 토론토 같은 경우는 5대5 차가운 물을 이용하고 있습니다. 우리는 한강이 있습니다. 지금 그런 부분들을 이용을 한다고 하면은 기존의 에어컨 사용량보다 에너지 사용량을 50% 이상 실증적으로 지금 낮출 수 있다는 것을 증명을 하고 있습니다. 네, 이상 여러 사례를 좀 짧게 말씀드렸고요. 네, 이상으로 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 그 수소 에너지를 포함해서 전기화의 중요성을 강조해 주시고, 그리고 에너지 효율성을 높이는 그런 첨단 기후 기술들을 소개해 주셨습니다. 시간 있으면 좀 더 들어봤으면 좋겠는 그런 여러 가지 첨단 기술들이 있었던 것 같습니다. We're going to move to the last speaker. Last speaker of this session is Dr. James Hooper. He is a climate change practice leader in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, and Mott MacDonald from UK. Please welcome him with big hands.
잘 들리나요? 네, 이제. 네, 안녕하세요. 저는 맥도널드 코리아 제임스 후퍼입니다. 저 오늘 영어로 진행하겠습니다. So today I'm going to speak about systems to tackle climate change. We've spoken a lot about the power of technology, but technology needs to be applied in an intelligent, integrated way to get the best impact from it. As former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said earlier, big strides have been made, for example, in electrifying vehicles. But if we try to sell everyone in Seoul, a couple of electric vehicles every 2 years, then that's not going to make the best use of technology in order to achieve a net zero future. So we really need to think about how we deploy technology and the systems into which we integrate that technology. So I work for an engineering consultancy. We have about 18,000 staff globally and work in 135 different countries. And increasingly, we see that we are being asked to work on projects which incorporate both decarbonization, but also increased resilience to climate risk. So to give a bit of context, as I said, we're originally a UK or UK headquartered consultancy. Now, the UK government in 2008 introduced a piece of legislation called the Climate Change Act, and this committed the UK through a recent update to achieving net zero in 2050. Now, as part of that legislation, the government is also required to outline 5-year carbon budgets, and those have to be outlined 12 years in advance. Now, this is really important because it sends a clear message to both the public and private sector to show them this is what's happening, you have the time to prepare for this, and that allows companies and industry to find the solutions, secure in the knowledge that this is a one-direction path, and they're not going to suddenly miss out because of a U-turn or a change in policy. So one of the sectors that we find ourselves working in most as an engineering consultancy is the built environment. The built environment is responsible for approximately 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions globally. 28% or so of those are down to energy usage, and the other 14% or so is as a result of the construction of buildings infrastructure. So the energy that goes into steel, that goes into concrete, for example, in those manufacturing processes. So it's really, really important that we decarbonize the built environment if we want to reach net zero by 2050. So how do we go about achieving net zero? Well, I mean, first of all, we have to build the right infrastructure, so we have to minimize the amount of construction. Obviously, the more materials we use, the more carbon emissions that are released as a result. We need to incorporate renewable energy. We need to think about electrifying transport and heat systems, as we've just heard about. And we also need to make sure that we're building that infrastructure to be resilient to future climate change and to make sure that we do decarbonize supply chains. And at the same time, thinking about nature-based solutions and how to incorporate carbon removal through nature into our development. But it's very hard to do that as a single organization. And to try and do that without considering where you sit inside the value chain is very tricky. Now, the UK government has introduced some extra guidance and legislation to try and push the construction sector in the right direction. And one of these is a policy note around UK government contracts. So any contract exceeding £5 million per annum, the bidding companies are expected to have net zero carbon emissions plans in order to be able to qualify to bid for those contracts. And the government has also released the construction playbook and other guidances around how to achieve net zero carbon and sustainable construction systems. But a key part of those is a reference document, which is a standard past 2080. And we, Mott MacDonald, along with a number of other engineering firms, collaborated to create this standard, which is about carbon management, so reducing carbon through effective management in buildings infrastructure. And this is a system which I want to talk about today. Organizations can certify to this standard, and in order to do that, they need to show that they have the systems in place which allow them to achieve the optimized carbon outcomes for the given work that they're undertaking. So we've currently been working with a number of organizations on PAS 2080. So we've been working with the UK Highways Network, which is called National Highways, and helping them to define the roles and responsibilities, so the accountability around who is going to be in charge of making sure that those low carbon outcomes are achieved. The tools, so how will they measure and then improve on that decarbonization process. What systems will they have in place to allow them to collaborate with other members of the value chain and to share information? And what actions, what's their plan to implement this going forward? We've also working with the Environment Agency. They're the body that, among other things, manage the UK's waterways, so rivers, for example, to ensure that they are not flooding and looking after those systems. So PAS 2080, what it really tries to deal with is how to build buildings and infrastructure in a low carbon way. How to think about that from a systems perspective. So how to make sure that you're not just thinking narrowly, but you're considering that, as I said, across the value chain. How to think about it from a whole of life perspective. So not just the carbon from construction, or not just the carbon that's involved in the operation of the asset, but both of those, and also the extending impacts beyond the project's boundaries. How the project is incorporating national nature-based solutions and resilience, and also how you're collaborating to share that information and bring other partners into the process. So really, in essence, it's about integrating carbon into decision-making. Now, in order to do that, you have to obviously understand the value system, the value chain that you're part of. So where do you sit within that? Who are the other stakeholders? Who do you need to consult? Whose guidance and guidelines do you need to understand if you're trying to decarbonize a piece of infrastructure, for example? So as an asset owner, you might own a given asset. That asset might sit within a network of other assets, and that might sit within a system. So the system might be run by the government. If we're thinking about an industrial estate, then the industrial estate has to have power supply, it has to have water supply. It might be, there might be various transport networks that run to that industrial estate. And within that industrial estate, there might be a given building that you're in charge of. But when you're thinking about upgrading that building or constructing a new building, you need to think about the network within which that building sits, and also the system in which that network operates. So if we look at it again, basically the standard, what it's trying to do is it uses this, the circle there represents this iterative approach. So you're trying to continually improve, you're assessing, you're monitoring the impact, you're reporting on that impact, you're looking at then how you can bring that back into future procurement, and then look at that improvement. And so all of that is centered around this, this integrating carbon into the decision making, and that's led by the leadership. There obviously has to be strong leadership and accountability, the target setting and baselines to show the direction of travel, and all of that leads to these decarbonized outcomes. What we see in projects is that we need to think very early on. There's no use thinking about decarbonization in the building phase. You need to be thinking before the asset exists, how can we reduce carbon? In theory, before you've started designing an asset, you can remove 100% of the carbon associated with that asset if you can find a way to achieve the same outcome without building that asset. So the first thing is to think, is it possible to do the same task with nothing? Secondly, if we can't do that, can we design it such that we need less materials? Can we be intelligent to use different technologies? And finally, can we be more efficient in the way that we're using materials? And at each of those stages, we can achieve a certain level of reduction in carbon emissions, and also a certain level of cost savings, as carbon is a very good metric, which is tied to cost. And so if we can avoid building something, we can save money in the process of not building it as well. So we also need to think, as I said, about how our asset impacts across a number of other sectors. And so this is an example in an annex here about If we're constructing a building, what impact that might have on the energy system, on the water system, on the transport system, on the waste system. We need to think about how those feed into our asset, and also what outputs our asset might have, which could be either beneficial to these other systems or which may require the inputs of other systems. And so we can think about this in a kind of exercise as a city, and we can think about it from the design phase. So do we need it? Optioneering, how do we go about putting this project together? The design, how do we design it in the most efficient way? And then how do we deliver it with the least of materials? How do we operate it using the least energy? And how do we then take it apart at the end of life? And so we need to consider all of those at the beginning. Again, as the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said earlier, he talked about POSCO. Now, obviously, if you're POSCO trying to deliver low-carbon steel through hydrogen, you need to think about, hydrogen. To use hydrogen, you need water to manufacture hydrogen. So where are you going to get your water from? How are you going to transport that water? Do you need to build new power transmission infrastructure to be able to take power from a renewable energy generation facility and feed it to the facility where you're making hot briquetted iron? How are you going to transport that iron? These are all factors which you would have to consider if you're using an integrated carbon management framework. I'll go through some of these quickly. This is basically just outlining some examples of how we consider all of the different things that might be important. So who will the users be? How will it affect the system? Will there require to be new water networks? Will there be requirements for new energy networks, new transport networks? How will staff get to the asset that you're building? These are all important considerations. If we can avoid carbon-intensive transport options and incorporate public transport, if we can build an asset next to an existing railway station, then obviously that is going to have presumably an overall positive outcome in terms of the carbon emissions of the project. And of course, there's a hierarchy in the way that we do this. So avoid building nothing being the best option. Switching, so is there a way that we can potentially recover materials or reuse materials? Or is the best we can do to improve? Can we just be more efficient in the way that we're doing? So we always try to look, the best option is to build nothing at all, and then down from there to see basically how we can reduce the largest amount of carbon. And of course, once we've done that, we need to be making sure that we're collecting that data and feeding it back into the process so that at every stage and at every year, we can ensure that we've got the best data available to allow us to improve the process again as we go forward. And finally, I guess a little bit of technology just to show how technology could be used in this process. Digital twins are very useful for understanding in the design phase where a lot of materials are used, to understand the landscape, the context of a project, and be able to look at it visually to see, is it possible to change this element? Is it possible to lower the embodied carbon in a given element? And so digital twins can be a very useful piece of technology in achieving this decarbonized future that we're looking to see. Is it possible to press the play button on the video? Thank you. So this is a video from a pumped hydro storage facility in Australia. So they are utilizing a previous mine, and then in order to store the power from renewable energy, they pump the water into a higher reservoir, and then when there is not enough electricity generation, for example at night, because solar is no longer producing power at night, then the water can flow through the pipes and generate electricity at that time. But this digital twin allows us to see which parts of the structure have high or low carbon intensity. So the red colors here, they represent a higher carbon intensity. And so that allows us to say, okay, this is a particular problem area. What can we do to try and drill in and reduce the carbon intensity of that element of this project? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 영국의 탄소 중립을 위한 여러 가지 정책적, 기술적 어떤 절차라든가 이런 노력을 잘 정리해 주셨던 것 같습니다. 근데 이제 문제는 제가 아까 4시 10분에 끝난다고 했는데 벌써 4시 20분이에요. 제가 이걸 질문이나 이런 것들을 하고 싶은 게 너무 많은데 제가 한 5분, 10분 정도 더 해도 될까요? 5분? 5분만 주시네요. 알겠습니다. I think we are behind the schedule a lot, and we have only additional 5 more minutes for Q&A. And I have just 1 or 2 questions for panel right here. The first question is, this question is to Mr. Rist. And based on your experience in Korea, what is the critical obstacle that you do business in Korea? I mean, especially the wind power energy development in Korea.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Critical. First of all, I think we, as a foreign company, we need to adapt to Korea, cultural-wise. So I think that's the beginning. So I, as a Norwegian, coming here to Korea, I must adapt to Korea. At the same time, we also need to engage and hire Koreans in our company. We need to learn the way of working here in Korea. But as I said also in my presentation, I think the most crucial now is to get better collaboration towards the authorities in order to speed up the process. That's I think it's very, very important. And finally, we need also to mobilize the world's best supply chain, which is in Korea. I mean, with all your yards, I think it's important that they also will be interested in making renewables.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned about localization of technology as well as working with local industrial ecosystem of climate technology, right? And also working with the government more effectively. My next question is, this question goes to Dr. James Hooper. What is your, as a consultant, world-leading consultant, what is your advice for Korea to build up robust, ecosystem, industrial ecosystem for climate technology development?
Oh, it's a very, very difficult question. So I think Mr. Rist just kind of touched on it. There are huge opportunities around renewable energy. The unavoidable, basically, the answer to climate change is to try and use less resources. However, there is an unavoidable fact that we will require an alternative energy system, a clean energy system, and that means that energy system has to be built out. We have no choice about that. So there is an unavoidable requirement to build out that energy system, and Korea is strategically very well located in order to provide the workshop for the world to help to roll out that renewable energy ecosystem. So, I mean, I think many of us will agree as Europeans that we're very keen to be a part of that, bringing our experience and some technology and lessons that we've learned in the North Sea, for example, in Europe, but then to partner with Korean companies to then access opportunities that exist in Asia, because Korea has an amazing opportunity to be the person that builds out that infrastructure through their incredible supply chains and manufacturing capacity, and it has to be done, and so Korea has the opportunity to seize that role in play, making that future possible.
Oh, thank you very much. I think this one goes with the K-hub that Mr. Ban Ki-moon talked about in his keynote and plenary talk in the first session. I do have 2 more questions, but due to the time limit, I'm going to stop here. 제가 질문하고 싶은 것 굉장히 많습니다. 그런데 지금 시간이 없는 관계로 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 그런데 아까 제가 처음 시작할 때 그 가장 좋은 포럼은 지식을 함양하는 게 아니라 어떤 지혜를 모으는 자리다 하고 말씀을 드렸는데요. 이 탄소 중립을 먼저 이뤄 나간 이 북유럽 3국하고 영국에서 저희가 우리한테 맞지 않는 내용도 좀 있는 것 같습니다. 하지만 그들의 경험들에서 우리가 지혜를 모아서 탄소 중립을 이루는 그런 길을 좀 더 빠르게 확보해 나갔으면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 장시간 이렇게 같이 해주신 여러분께 감사드리면서 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for your very inspirational presentation. 감사드리고요. 홍승관 우리 교수님께도 여러분 다시 한번 박수 보내주시기
네,
바랍니다.
감사합니다.
좌장으로서 아마 아쉬움이 많으실 것 같습니다. 네, 그래도 오늘 좋은 말씀 잘 들었고요. 이렇게 세션 1은 마무리를 하도록 하겠습니다. 우리 발표자 여러분과 홍승관 원장님은 이제 자리로 다시 모시도록 하겠습니다.